So I'm not beating about the bush, I want to go straight to a point. For instance, in Advaita Vedanta, and how this science is being understood not by everyone, so please don't misunderstand me. It's not that we're going to paint everyone with the same brush, but there is this tendency somehow slipped in and gained the momentum that in fact that energetic transformation is not a necessary process. It can all happen somehow, somewhere on a mental, intellectual level, and we just outsmart consciousness and become who we are without any nitty-gritty work. As tempting as that sounds, this is a very, very flat and narrow perspective. Because even if we go back to, let's say, expositions of some of the greatest teachers who are being held today in the modern world of Neo-Advaita as the apostles of that tradition, they not only never discarded and disregarded that energetic process, but they were made by that process itself. They were the fruits of that process. They were the example of that process. And if that process ushered and culminated in anything, it's precisely because it was very, very real. For instance, Ramana Maharshi, repeatedly quoted by Facebook gurus, by the internet, everywhere, that just to kind of probe the position. But somehow I don't read that many sayings by Ramana Maharshi where he actually spoke about how arduous that process is, how demanding, and we will speak more about it. There is this, for instance, a very simple sentence with regard to Kundalini. And oops, I've just said that word. Just like came out, flew out. Because you're not supposed to mention that word. That term has been in exile for centuries, for thousands of years, even within the tradition which gave that term. Whenever you say Kundalini, it's like a dirty word, because it's like it has very, very unpleasant connotations. So we're here, not just tonight, but we're here to clear up the grounds a little bit so that we can understand what this Kundalini means, what this Shakti means, what does it embody, how does it relate to the process whereby we get to know our essential nature. In fact, how do we experience anything in the first place? So there is this line when Ramana Maharshi was asked to comment on Kundalini, and there are plenty of materials one can go for references. He said that Kundalini is nothing other than the self. That's statement one. And also he said that when there was this, let's say, further questions with regard to what about if Atma Vikara is being applied, and I'm sure most of you know that by Atma Vikara we understand that process of self-inquiry where Ramana's emphasis, or let's say emphasis as he became known in the West, with the question of who am I? What happens then? Is there a way to bypass the process? No. His response was very clear. He said that eventually, when that process of self-inquiry bears its fruit, Kundalini will rise on her own in the medium channel, known under various names, but mostly in the literature as Sushumna. And so this process is unavoidable. This is in terms of realizing Brahman or Shiva, or whatever we call it, absolute, the self, by any other means or via any other means. Doesn't matter what means would be employed, what methodology will be utilized for that end. It's like there is only one passage to God, and that passage runs straight inside our body. It connects us to God at all times while we were in this formless existence, being in bliss, and when we were dissolved. So this connection is never lost, but that connection is being carried simply within the spiritual anatomy, which in itself sits within this very physical anatomy. Hence, there is no shame to talk about it. There is no shame to address this. There is no shame to go and find out what really takes place. Not what takes place in the wildest conceptualizing of this and that and cons and pros and what have you, but what is actually taking place. Where is our consciousness actually rests? How does awareness expresses itself? Essentially speaking, spiritual knowledge was always a domain of priestly caste. They were the guardians, for better or worse. Whatever reason, historical, cultural, there was that knowledge was entrusted into them, and the custodians of various traditions were responsible for preserving that knowledge. When that knowledge was preserved, it was passed from heart to heart, and it survived. In those traditions, which for whatever reason that knowledge was not passed, tradition calcified to itself and simply died within and remained just a shell. It's as simple as that. You can arrest me for these statements, but I bear witness to that deep within my own experiences. Because when that energy is literally awakens to itself, it speaks to itself, it unfolds within, as the Bhagavad Gita itself speaks. You know that one of the most important Hindu scriptures, the self realizes itself within itself, for itself. And that's really what that process is all about. For whatever reason, that knowledge was deeply coded in highly metaphorical language, so that perhaps it would not become the domain of those who are not worthy to hear it, not worthy to realize and understand that. And we can talk about it separately, if that poses some questions and creates some kind of paradoxical dilemmas. However, the arrival of Tantra itself was precisely that. Just as the teaching of Buddha was revolutionary at his time, because it simply was a deep need to purify the field of Dharma from, let's say, overly ritualized approaches, so that the very term, the very meaning of nirvana, life in freedom from the bounding influence of one's actions, would become a living reality. In the same way, the arrival of Tantra, circa 8th to 10th, 11th century, when it was formulated, was precisely that. It was the movement which was the mixture of everything that existed at around that time in the Indian subcontinent. And those who were carrying this tradition, let's say, within themselves, through themselves, those who have had this ability to realize that knowledge within, and that knowledge, when it realized within, it could be cognized to the level where one can literally perceive deep within one's being the whole creation down to its very fiber, how it is made, how it vibrates, how time and space relate to each other. And that's the proper definition of the term rishi, because although some may think that the term rishi is the one who is the seer, and this is how it is often translated. Rishi is the seer, right? I'm sure you've seen that. Rishi is the one who sees. But the very root of that term, rishi, is not the one who actually sees, but the one who perceives with an inner ear. He hears, he recognizes all these vibrations, all this myriad of vibrations deep within, and able to see reality as it is, before even that reality manifests in whatever way or form, whatever pathway it may follow, chosen from the field of all potentialities. So Tantra is that tradition which explicitly spoke about this very process, this very messy process of psychophysiological transformation, without which there is no true self-realization, no matter how great is the desire. Absolutely. If there is no Shakti present, forget about it. Shakti is there in the first place, and Shakti is the one, Shakti who is contracted in the first place. And it is Shakti which expands to itself. And this is what Tantra is about. It's about tuning our being on all its levels so that it can vibrate with the frequency where it can cognize spontaneously its identity with the Supreme.